Chucky has gone through a lot of changes since his release, and at one point was often considered a top 10 killer. But after the changes in November and his recent buff, his place in the tier list has been a bit harder to nail down. Me personally would put him in mid B tier to bottom A, as his 1v1 is great but can be punished with cooldowns, some maps hurting him a lot due to some loops being hard to play, and his lack of consistent map pressure and mobility. However, I thought it would be a good idea to take away some of my bias and ask others. So over the past month, I did polls asking individually which killers are stronger or weaker than the good guy. Before we get into the results and what I can gather are the reasons for them, I want to clear a couple things up. There were a few killers I did not poll, as the answers were very obvious to me and many others. Those killers were Nurse, Blight, Hillbilly, Kaneki, Trapper, Myers, Skull Merchant, and Ghostface. Everyone else was free game.
I'll kill you quickly. Live to see the dawn.
Starting off, we have the killer that started this whole discussion, which was Wesker, who has had some changes, taking him down from his often considered top spot on a lot of tier lists. Many of the reasons given for him being better than Chucky was his built-in slowdown, since survivors have to get rid of the infection, as well as his ability to have some decent map mobility and built-in info into his kit, making him what even I would consider a more well-rounded killer. To be clear here, Wesker and Chucky are really close in strength, in my opinion, to the point saying one is better than the other is like saying Scully is worse than Trapper.
I'm more off-putting.
No, I'm more off-putting.
I'm more unattractive to put in a lead role.
Well, I'm a bigger box office drag.
Kids, you're both just awful.
Next we have Demo, a killer that has fallen a bit from grace, at least in the community's mind. The only thing Demo has going over Chucky is more impactful add-ons if they can run them without getting rid of their quality of life ones, and better map mobility, but this just isn't enough to make up for Demo's almost basic chase. While not the worst, not nearly useful in enough situations to even make him close to Charles. Oni was an interesting one, and one I saw a lot of discourse for, especially after some recent changes to his flicks that I will not go into here. Oni, once he overcomes that hump of getting into his power, has everything Chucky wishes he did. Map mobility, built-in slowdown by needing to stay healthy, plus he's extremely more lethal by having an instant down with a demon dash, which in turn allows him to snowball and possibly win in the single use of the power, as well as a better perk synergy, at the point I will bring up more once we get to Spirit. Plague was definitely a close call, and for good reason. Plague is a macro and micro killer that has almost all the things Oni has going for her, with a few issues mostly being a bit add-on dependent, as well as some maps giving her some issues, but for the most part she just overtakes Chucky in most basic parts of the gameplay loop, from both the 1v1 and, more importantly, the 1v4 aspects. Pinhead, rest in peace.
I have to go now. My planet needs me.
Was one I was surprised by, but do understand. Pinhead's biggest pro is in his 1v4 pressure with the box. However, with that, his 1v1 chase is not something that can be a 100% guaranteed hit. It can often hold him back on palette-dense maps and teams that can keep up with the box management. Xeno is another case of having a lot in her kit that should make her better than Chucky on paper, with map traversal and a great looping tool. However, turrets taking you out of power can be detrimental, and if things are set up well enough, can waste enough of the Xeno's time that the upsides don't really matter. It was joked about for a little bit that after Houndmaster's buff that she had a pocket Chucky scamper on command, and even with that being nerfed, it doesn't get rid of her great zoning and map traversal, as well as most of her kit being M1s, making her perk options immense. This is not even going into her general strength in both the 1v1 and 1v4 that lets her keep pressure at almost all times and allows for snowballs in a lot of situations. Speaking of perks, Spirit was and still is compared to Chucky a lot, and the debate rages on who is better and why.
He does exactly what I do, but better.
Spirit is a 110 killer that can move super fast after a slight cooldown. Sound kind of familiar? But she has a few things over Chucky. She's faster and harder to react to. Her cooldown can be controlled as short phasing is an option. But the big thing that makes her better, in my opinion, is all her hits are basic hits, which means that she can use every perk in the game to some degree without playing at a detriment, and allows her to edge over Chucky in terms of strength on top of everything else noted. Artist was a close call from the community and was a hard one for me to fully understand as to why she's not as strong as she was due to the game changing around her. She still has a lot going for her with a range power that allows her to shut down loops, keep range pressure, get info, and even chase multiple survivors at once. Unknown is in a similar camp to Artist in almost all fronts and has the additions of some slowdown with the clones as well as map traversal that leads to some amazing snowballs and in general really good macro pressure. Wraith has a lot of things that many of the killers people voted were above Chucky has, but he doesn't really have anti-loop, and that hurts his chances a lot. And let me just make this clear, Wraith is a really simple killer. There's not really much more I could say here. His map traversal does not make up for his lack of anti-loop. That's just what I'm going to say. Not to say Wraith's bad, but nowhere near Chucky. Freddy has a lot going for his map traversal, some slowdown, and a good anti-chase and anti-loop tool, perk synergies, but at the end of the day, he is still a basic killer that has to play most loops normal and struggles just as much as all of them, even with how much fun I find him to be, and against teams that know how to stay awake, can't get to the point of being stronger than the good guy. I wanted to talk about Huntress and Slinger at the same time because of the discourse around them in general. Slinger, in my opinion, is actually the closest killer to Chucky, not Spirit, and has a couple things over Charles, that being M1 hits, and that a lot of loops can be made pretty much impossible to play if you know the right shots. Now, I wanted to bring up Huntress here as a common sentiment is that she's better than Slinger, and seeing that she was considered worse than Chucky while Slinger was better was an interesting case of what I can only think is bias being shown when the argument has a different context. Huntress is by no means the best killer in the game, but her ability to have a pretty much unlimited skill ceiling and being limited of what happens to be the map can make her feel like a gamble to play sometimes. But her downtime can be faster than both Slinger and Chucky in most situations. And I really do think this just comes down to people thinking Huntress is a little bit too basic to be considered better than Chucky. Meanwhile, I think that Slinger is also like generally regarded as not being that great by the community, at least as good as he used to be, which is something that also happened with Chucky.
Such is this. One must keep themselves entertained.
Vecna was a hard one to really explain. To me, he is the new Demogorgon in the sense that he is right in the middle of my tier list, and is where every killer is pretty much compared to for strength, with his 4 spells giving him options in most situations, and like 20 builds. His real downsides are just once his cooldowns are down, he's just a 115 killer. This isn't even going into the magic items that can hurt him a lot if used right. Or the fact that most of the strength from his power comes from the fact that he has multiple weaker versions of other powers rather than the powers being strong on their own. While the Lich can have a lot of upsides, the matchup is just a bit poor.
He said it! He said it!
Clown is a killer that I often feel goes underrated for how strong he can be, even with the basic idea of pre-drop and win. A lot think happens. This doesn't work if the Clown knows what they're doing, but his downs still do take a bit of time, and while his builds do allow him to get to a point of snowballing, they often take time to build up to that point, and a lot of his better situations require specific add-ons to be a lot more reliable. Nemesis has zombies, a good anti-loop tool, built-in slowdown, and that is about it. While all good, and Nemesis is in a good spot at the moment, apart from more than a few good add-ons, but still, he does need 3 hits to down, and takes a bit of time to reach tier 3 for his true power in a lot of matches, something Chucky doesn't even have to deal with in the same way. Dredge is often the punching bag of the community, and a killer that is somehow overrated and underrated at the same time. Remnant makes almost every loop a 50-50. Another killer that does that. Really? Plus some decent map traversal with the locker teleport, plus Nightfall making all of that better. He still does struggle with the whole W playstyle, and without a build to support him, a lot of situations can be quite overwhelming. Knight is the macro king of the game, and I will die on this hill. I can split pressure while putting survivors in situations that make them sandwich into hits, but a lot of this requires not only good game sense and positioning, but setup time, forethought, and a little bit of luck, which makes it a powerful power, but is hurt by the time it can take to make things go in a way that is really, really consistent. Bubba, the most M1, M2 killer in the game. The camping monster. Now, what I mean by that first statement is that while Bubba can instant down, he still needs to play loops in a standard way, making his down, while fast, have a lot of the same issues many standard killers have to deal with, since pallets that he can shred quickly, granted, can be a major issue for his down times, and windows are an issue, unless he's running BAM, but let's be honest here, what Bubba isn't. The high MMR monster themselves, the twins, is a killer that can literally be in 2 places at once. Can have info whenever they need, most importantly, can snowball off of one good play. While they are hurt by many anti-slug perks, those are not common enough to be seen as a real issue for them, and while their bugs can be an issue, when they work, leading to matches that are often lost before they even start. Pyramid Head was the closest in the polls, and for some good reasons. From being able to hit through walls, making mini loops hard to do anything in, and zoning that makes Huntress blush, Plus, the biggest thing of having what is basically a built-in tunneling ability that also prevents saves and saves a lot of time, meaning he can just keep the pressure up, with his biggest issue being vertical maps and no really good add-ons. Doctor isn't bad by any means, but as with Clown, his downs can be guaranteed, but take a lot of time to get to that point. This is a situation of a killer that I didn't really have too much to say about. These aren't too common. I just thought it was funny that I literally, in my script, wrote one sentence down for Doctor and Wraith. Dracula is a killer that since release has often been seen as one of the top 5s, and this voting didn't seem off at all. His 3 forms give him something he can do at most loops and situations, and unlike Vecna, his cooldowns are not that much of an issue. Hag is another 110 killer that can't chase too well and needs to set up to get the most use of, well, everything. She suffers a lot from that setup time, though, and without a proper way to make herself threatening and chase, is just not consistent enough to be anywhere near Chucky's level.
Or worse.
Larry at this point in his career is just a bulldozing machine, and once he marks you, it's almost going to result in a hit very quickly. Then we have his macro aspects. To not get only around the map and pressure people, but he can gain info, which in a lot of situations can be the difference between a win and a loss. After Chucky's changes in November, his dash was compared to Pig, and for some good reasons, but Pig's setup, pallet stopping her power, and the big tail of the dash just makes it worse in almost every way. The one thing she has going for her is the reverse bear traps, but those have an issue of being RNG on how long they do anything, for as well as needing to down to get the most use out of them anyway, something she can often struggle with. Trickster is a killer that at the moment is quite the enigma and suffers from a lot of the same issues of Huntress, but also has the issue of needing to build up to the point of a down as it takes a few knives to get to that point. And even being 115 and range cannot get the pressure he needs fast enough in comparison to Chucky. So with the ones I didn't pull for being Trapper, Nurse, Blight, Kaneki, Myers, Ghostface, Billy, and Legion, that is every killer and what are some things that we noticed while going over every single one of them? Map pressure. This is one of Chucky's biggest pain points. While Slice and Dice can give some map mobility that requires some RNG on pallet placements and can be something that is easy to take into account, and with the newest release of Ken showing that even a basic M1 killer with the ability to get around the map fast is just insanely strong in this game, and always will be. Being 110 as well, even in his downtime, Chucky can't keep up. Map mobility and map pressure will be king, and it's something almost all the top tiers have going for them in one way, shape, or form. Perks! Chucky can't use a lot of perks. He's an M2 killer that has a massive tail when he's undetectable that also can't get around the map that fast. With all of those things, it doesn't really leave much from apart from passive slowdown and aura, and even those have a lot of factors that can make them often not the best use in all matches. And this is one of the things about Chucky that a lot of people don't really talk about too much, and was one of the biggest selling points for why Spirit was better than Chucky for a while there. Snowballing! I mention this in a lot of the killers because I do think it is a massive factor into what makes a killer good that no one really talks about too often. This is a huge thing in my mind and something that a lot of the top tiers can do with ease, from Blight's rushes to even Drac going into back form to get around the map to get to his next target super quickly. Chucky's just he at their fastest can't really be turned into more pressure due to his cooldowns and low base speed. Even if you find a new target after a down, it will take some time to down them. Chucky can have a fast down. Keyword in that sentence is can. There's a lot of factors, from his cooldown to the loop you're currently at to the survivor's position. A lot of these things can stop him from being able to get constantly fast downs. Alright, Bennett, if that's all the stuff that makes Chucky bad, what makes him good compared to the killers that were below him? I'm glad you asked, random viewer. Chucky can force 50-50s. This is one of his biggest things. This is something I mentioned with Dredge, but forcing 50-50s can be a massive gain, as it makes most loops a hit, even with the pallet up or down, which leads into scampers. While not what it used to be when it was a manual thing, it's still a powerful tool that can be used to make many loops almost unplayable, which leads into the no-hold W. This is part of the reason Kaneki is so good at the moment. You can try, and when Chucky is on CD, that is the best time to do it, but otherwise, even though exhaustion perks can be... you can catch up. Like, even through exhaustion perks, Chucky is going to catch up to you if there's a window or a pallet there for him to scamper through. And in the cameraman games, something that is often overlooked in Chucky's kit, and while not the most impactful thing all the time, does give him advantages many killers would love to have. Overall, my hope with all of this was to explain that Chucky is not some unstoppable killer that still has many issues, but also, let's just look over the other killers and what issues they might have in comparison to Chucky, and how tier lists should be maybe looked at more critically, because I feel like the problem, and I think the Death Slinger and Huntress thing kind of showed this, is that the bias of where you're comparing something from can often show through. Again, a lot of people would say that Huntress is better than Death Slinger. Not everybody, but some people would. But in this poll, I learned the complete opposite. Most people think that Death Slinger is better than Chucky, which the math ain't math in there. But I think it's just because of I think it's because of the comparison points of the question, which can influence someone's answers on things. There's a thing called leading a question for a reason, right? In any case, this was probably one of the longest videos I worked on. This last part isn't scripted at all. This is more like a normal thing. But I thank you guys for listening. If you learned anything or have any thoughts on the polls or what the final results were, go ahead and let me know. I'll debate you guys. Just try to be civil in the comments, please. Anyways, I love y'all. Have a good one, and yeah, bye.
Subscribe, damn it. I'll be back. I always come back, and so should you, you moron.